To stage to introduce Jim Hogan. Yeah, keep doing that, that's great. Good evening and welcome. There are folks here who are not regular like Mike, Jay, and Fania. Special welcome to folks like some of the press here. Thank you. Ajoy did a great presentation. He is a gentleman. Just like Ramesh said, I know him for about 2 decades now. Great guy. And so Ajoy was talking about the SoC realization, and then as he mentioned, we wanted to, okay, it's all great, technology is great, but how do we make money in SoC realization? There are fewer and fewer startups. The exits are far and few in between. And as we were discussing, who should be the person who can really talk about it, who has the depth and knowledge. One person stood out, that was Jim Hogan. And Jim is equally a gentleman, and it's my pleasure to know Jim for about 15 plus years, something like that, from Cadence days. Great guy. Jim is, as many of you know, he is the founding partner of Vista Ventures LLC. Prior to this, he had 35 years of experience in semiconductor industry, hands-on. He has everything. He can talk about all the problems he has done. He has founded and he has invested in successful companies that have got successful exits in this market. And overall, Jim is a very positive person, very smiling, charming, you can see. Great guy. Great guy to go have beer with, right? And also he hosts one of the best parties in the EDA world, and I rarely miss it. I like to go to his party because he's the entertainer. He's the lead guitarist of his own band. He is what else do you have, Jim?
Serve my wine.
There you go. He has his own wine. He has a vineyard with he makes wine. I mean, he has so many great talent, and it's good to know him. And we are really happy to have you here today. Welcome.
Thank you, everybody. I think I might answer a lot of the questions that were presented to Ajoy during my presentation. So my presentation is going to be, okay, why do we care, right? We talk about this stuff all the time, but really, what difference does it make, right? So I'm going to go from the abstract to the specific. Okay, let's start with system. We talk about ecosystems, and basically, a system is an integration of separate functions with an organic unity. Now, often it's presented like paintings in the Louvre, nicely framed, arranged, good lighting, whatnot. The world, we would love it to look this way because then we can migrate it through it with some certainty. Anyway, the world looks more like a dirty medieval village with pigs running through the marketplace, right? So the challenge, the guys like me, because remember what I'm about is selling companies either as a financial product or as a, taking them public, or that's what I do. So the challenge for me is to try to find the organic unity, not in the thing on the left, but in the thing on the right. So that's the world we live in. And it's constantly evolving. It's just moving at light speed, and we'll talk about that in a second. And it presents all kinds of challenge. God, it's been entertaining for these almost 40 years. And hopefully I got a few more years left to enjoy the ride. Okay, let's start with this one. So data's, a year old. No, it's not a year old. Yeah, it's a year old. But it really sort of predicts what's going to happen in 12. And you can see the overriding growth. I mean, serious 100% growth on this market is with cell phones, smartphones. Storage is up there, Lewis, driven by the cloud sort of capability. Media tablets are growing and displacing PCs at the other end. So they almost swap numbers. If you'll notice, tablets are 35 plus, PCs are negative 36. Interesting in that the Mac went up, but we can talk about that in a minute. Automotive, which is one of everybody's favorite markets, you know, it's stable, it lasts, they're putting, you know, microcontrollers and everything, yet it's only about 7% growth on an electronic basis, right? So clearly what we got to focus on to achieve that $500 million in sales a year to justify the investment is the mobile market. So let's talk about that. Okay, Steve, you know, anybody know Steve? Everybody knew Steve when he was alive? Probably, not too many people know him when he's dead, I guess. Sorry, bad joke. But Steve was an impossible son of a bitch, man. He was just impossible to work for. He was impossible to talk to. But what he was all about, and unrelentless in his quest for the user experience. He would not compromise that. You guys have all heard the stories. You've read the book. You know, the guy would throw phones at people, you know, when he didn't like them. He'd shoot people like Paper Master, you know, for getting the antenna wrong. He'd go on the front of the web page and tell the world he shot Paper Master. I mean, the guy didn't tolerate anybody. So I was glad to see him, to be honest with you. I figured he probably was done, you know, much earlier than he was. But he made the iPad 3 launch last year, right? So there's 65 million iPads in the world today, right? And that wasn't a market that even existed 2 years ago, right? Well, if we go off to the right, I think that's an iPhone 4S. So the 4S, you know, is a big hit. You know, I got to tell you, every one of my kids has one, and every one of my grandkids has one. So it's, I don't know, I think that's maybe, you know, maybe I'm a little skewed one way or the other on this sort of giving your kids phone things. But look, I don't know how people get by without those darn things, and I'm like not an early adapter, and I got a couple in my backpack right now. But hey, the first iPhone 3 was launched 4 years ago. 4 years ago, everybody said, what, Apple's building a phone? Can you believe that? Think about that. 4 years ago, they had nothing in the market. Now they're about 20% of market share. Okay, I put this thing, the Kindle, on here just to remind myself, you know, it isn't necessarily Apple or what they do, the device manufacturer that does this, but somebody has a cyber market and has figured out how to ship stuff to California without paying sales tax. So anybody does a lot of buying like I do on the internet, believe me, you're on Amazon all the time. And the other thing, pretty well known, is Amazon's got a phone coming based on OMAP 4, I think, and which is, you know, certainly something we can talk about too. But look at the people that are doing things. Would anybody figured a bookseller 4 years ago would have a Kindle device and then soon a phone? Or so the guy that made the Mac would have a phone 4 years ago? Not me. So I'm trying to get ahead of the curve now and predict stuff that actually might happen. All right, so this is kind of the slide, the intersect slide, that Joy showed up between Exxon and Apple. So that occurred beginning of this year. So think about it. The last century, the one that at least I was part of, maybe some of you guys weren't around yet, but you know, but it was driven by energy, right? It was the quest for energy. Think about geopolitics for a second. Think about geopolitics. Think about Iran and, you know, how the Americans went there, or British went in there before us and subverted all that political regime change for oil, right? Exxon is was, for the 20th century, the most valued company. Exceeded General Electric, right, which we kind of think is a pretty good company too. But Standard Oil, New Jersey, Exxon. Standard Oil, California, Exxon. Rockefellers have been on top of the heap for over 110 years, right, based on energy. Now, it's interesting, as anybody that pulls up the gas tank in California in the last year, I think I paid, in Santa Cruz where I live, I paid $4.59 for 87 octanes in like May, right? So it's no surprise to me that when you compare the results from the beginning of the year to now, darn, you know, Exxon's got more cash. so it makes sense that they have more cash. Now they utilize that. That seems like a lot of money, $17 billion, but think what they have to do. They have to have oil fields. They got to go deep sea, offshore stuff that costs, each one of those platforms is $1 billion. Right now, I drove down to Southern California to see one of my kids, and I drove Highway 33. I don't know if any of you has done that, but Highway 33 goes through towns like Taft, and Taft is an old oil town. You know, so my family's from that place called Taft. You know, they're just a bunch of beet farmers and oil guys. But for all my adult life, I've never seen the storefronts all filled in Taft. Now, not only do I see all the storefronts filled in Taft, but there's new pickups in every slot. So that's what happened over the last year. They opened every oil field in California, every oil field in Texas, and every oil field in Canada. So the equipment business in oil exploration is going through the roof. However, they couldn't keep up with our friends in Cupertino. Look at what happened. I mean, look, this is from the beginning of the year. They generated a whole bunch more enterprise value. They used some cash, although they still got $27 billion in cash. And they managed to get that done. Now, sort of, we're semiconductor guys. I'm a semiconductor guy. So, you know, when you think of Intel as the King Kong in this, right? But Intel, look, they're heading the wrong direction in every industry, right? Intel, in terms of revenues, got $53 billion in revenue and only $13.65 billion of cash. They can't build another fab, okay? Intel doesn't have enough money to build another fab, okay? So last time I looked at ARM, just because ARM's, you know, is the other 800-pound gorilla in this. So we look at ARM, and, you know, on almost $1 billion in revenue, they have a very high multiple on a market cap basis, where more probable on an enterprise basis, they're at about $12 billion, which is incredible, you know, multiple, based on $1 billion. Think if EDA had that. Every EDA company would be worth $15 billion, right? I mean, the big guys, you know, Synopsys, Cadence, Mentor, right? So I added Qualcomm because I think the company that Intel worries most about is Qualcomm. And it's because every Droid computer, not every Droid device, but most of them are based on Snapdragon, which is Qualcomm. Samsung uses Tegra, which is NVIDIA, right? So those guys are pushing Droid, right? Droid's going to be the Microsoft of our current era, right? They're going to be on every device, and every application is going to be Droid enabled. And I think Apple's going to be Apple. So it's going to be Apple versus Droid, with Apple with about 20% of the market. So this is why we focus here. These guys fill the fab, okay? To your question. Okay, hard to read, okay? But let me try to walk you through this. The thing on the left is market share. Apple's that thin blue line on the bottom. Everybody see that? Now, profit in the industry. Apple's not so thin. Apple has 50% of all the profit in the industry and less than 10% of market share. So they're getting premium prices, right? And they're securing higher margins than everybody else. Why are they securing higher margins than everybody else, you might ask? I'm glad. Thank you for asking. Oh, one more thing before that. There's chaos. There's chaos. So who can do these $500 million big things? Well, interesting, it's those guys on top. And they're not the traditional guys, right? They're not guys that I grew up with. RCA, remember Mike used to work for RCA. Something called Thompson, which is forgotten by everybody but us three, I think. But look who it is. It's Apple, of course. It's Amazon. We talked a bit about them, but their primary core competency is commerce. God bless them. Google, you know, they do search, but they think they're trying everything else. They got a phone, by the way. They bought Motorola, right? Facebook, well, I probably should change that because that was kind of a overstated case, perhaps. Microsoft, of course, they're struggling to figure out what the heck they're going to do with all their money, and as the PC market goes down negative 36%, oh, by the way, wasn't that the thing that Nokia and Sony Ericsson was going to use? OS 8 that got delayed 3 more months? Good luck on their launching a phone, right? Impossible. Sony, again, same deal. Samsung's interesting. We think of most as a device company, but I think they're pretty much in user market. TVs, home electronics. I was in Chile, in South America, and I saw a Samsung car. So they build cars too. I didn't even know that, but anyway, they're there. Now the real scary guy, and I probably should put Cisco up here, but is Huawei, right? So one of my companies, we're working on the Huawei 4G phone. They figure they're going to come to market with that 4G phone for $149. Think about that. That's going to change the price point. A lot of people are going to go 4G if they can afford the coverage, or the guys that do the like AT&T, Verizon, and things. But Huawei is going to kill the market with a cheap 4G. Now they're Droid guys. Nokia, man, if you go back to when I was a kid. Now, some of the people know I spent a lot of time in Europe, with my family, but Nokia made boots and tires, right? That's what they made. Somewhere along the line, they became a phone guy, and they actually built a pretty reliable little phone. If anybody had one of those old phones, you could drop it off the roof of your house, damn thing would still work, right? It was a great little phone, right? They lost their way big time when they would put Symbian in there. They tried their own operating system. They couldn't get the apps. So there is nobody in this room. Oh, let me show of hands. Anybody buy a Nokia phone in the last year? My point exactly, right? So, and then RIM, it should be rest in peace probably instead of rest, RIM, right? Poor RIM. It went from BlackBerry, which was hotter than hell with all the corporate guys doing email and stuff, and it took all those guys like me that were email guys and created a little baby terminal, right? That's not the way the kids work. The kids are point, touch, exactly what Steve says. And those guys in BlackBerry is stuck with old farts like me that never buy anything, right? So anyway, but the primary point so Apple's got it all. They've done it all. They've got the IP coverage. They bought all the Nortel patents, which are pretty big amount of patents to keep people from knocking on their doors with lawsuits, right? They've done the cloud content. Every time you ask Siri something, she has to run back to Apple to see what I can do, and then comes back and says, I'm not available. I didn't understand, I can't help you now. But they got the innovation at Apple. This is another key thing is, like Amazon, they figured out financial and commercial innovation, right? So they did that with iTunes and iFilm and things like that. The iOS, that's probably as important as anything. The same OS, when you're writing an app for Apple, they have the same OS across all systems, whether it's an Intel processor, whether it's an ARM processor. What they do is they have a little different driver set for each based on different scenarios, and that's going to be a huge verification problem. For Apple, it's made it simpler because they have what they call scenarios, and there's about 8 scenarios that Apple supports out of the billions of scenarios that the application software will create. Okay, so the iOS is a secret to Apple's architecture. Apple's never an innovator in terms of technology. They're kind of a late adopter, actually. Where they really put the innovation in is on architecture. And it's based on the OS to enable app guys to bring their applications to the Apple platforms once. You just write one. By contrast, Chi-Foon Chang, Chi-Foon, right? His son runs a division of games at Electronic Artists in Redwood City. So you think about the problem they have. They have to support those games across multiple platforms and multiple releases. There is not one OS in the game world, right? There's just one OS in Apple. So it makes it a lot easier to attract application guys and a lot easier as an application guy to write that. So software is key. It's like Joy was talking about it. Software sort of drives us on the hardware side now. In the old days, we used to, go back to the mid-90s, we had a microprocessor, Intel usually. We had Microsoft OS. We had Phoenix drivers, right? Okay, write your software. It's exactly the opposite now, right? They got a phone, they got a pad, they got a TV. Now, they're capturing a lot of value with their system on chip, right? They chose to do it in-house. They don't rely on somebody else. They brought that value in, And they created that themselves and have a relationship with their foundry, Samsung. Now it's kind of interesting. They have a lawsuit with Samsung too, because if you took a Galaxy phone, you know, at the beginning of the year, and you had 5 apples around you, and the apples are all talking to each other, well, the Galaxy would talk really well with the apples, right? So I don't know if they copied anything, but that's kind of weird, you know? So there's a huge lawsuit going on right now, and it's kind of interesting. I don't know who I was talking to about in this room, but I was searching around for some quotes for this pitch, and I got to read a whole bunch of Steve Jobs emails on the subject because they're all public knowledge because of the lawsuit. Anyway, so the key, that's not the point. The point is that they captured a lot of value in the SoC, okay? The SoC is a key value driver. One of the reasons they enjoy the margins and the multiples they do is because they took control over their own SoC. Speaking of which, okay, the top thing's an iPad 3, bottom thing's an i4S, right? Hey, see that thing off to the right? That's the retinal display. Okay, it's Qualcomm and stuff on that. But look predominantly in the middle and it says A5. Same hardware, same software. They're using a platform and going across a couple domains. The pad domain, the phone domain, by the way, it works in the Air. The MacBook Pro is the same. Anyway, the point is, that's one of the reasons Apple can have such high margins is because they keep the hardware all the same. Okay. So, not that, you know, that Apple's the end all of all things, but they figured out the right way to do this. And I'm not the only guy that can figure out how Apple did this. You know, I mean, there's a billion people in the world trying to do this right now, and everybody's going to emulate Apple, except they're going to use Droid. So we are going to be working on a lot of Droid-based SoCs. Absolutely. By the way, that's 32 nanometer, right, for the fab guys in the room. Okay, so here's a couple things. This is kind of some more numbers behind the joy stuff. Hey, Moore's Law. Moore's Law is slowing down. Moore's Law, you know, we sort of predictably every 2-3 years have a new process generation that gave us twice as many transistors in the same area, half the power, and twice the performance. Well, that ship has sailed. We still get a lot of transistors, but the performance and power doesn't scale anymore. Okay? So it's called Moore's more. I don't know, Michael, you probably got a better term for it than I do. But the notion is that you just add processors. And that started happening, I don't know, kind of mid-90s with audio processors. What really drove it was when video came on board and you just had to take off the video load and put it on another dedicated processor on a SoC. That created all kinds of contention for memory. You know, we had to put blocking techniques in. Anyway, it created all kinds of complexity. So now you just don't have a video processor, you got an audio processor, you got some DSP for doing mathematical functions yet undefined but available to software, and you have security, for example, right? They're all in contention for the same limited resources, i.e. access to memory and IOs. So that's a big problem in the architecture, right? And then the software keeps getting complex, right? The software demands the hardware to do things. And it's really difficult to create a optimal SoC without totally understanding the software, or at least being able to verify that software against your hardware. So this notion of virtualization, interesting, right? But I did a couple behavioral synthesis companies. I did something called AutoESL that got sold about a year ago. And I was thinking, well, that's a good idea. You know, they got to have it. Well, no, it didn't work like that, because what happened is the market didn't choose to use behavioral synthesis, write C. What they did is they chose to buy the blocks and assemble them with the Trenta tools, right? So you know, I think that trend is going to keep going, because you don't want to use open source stuff because you can't verify that stuff, right? You want to use stuff that is guaranteed by companies that are going to be around, that are reliable, that are well documented, and will stand behind their product in terms of support. So that's why we see guys like, you know, ARM doing so well, and then all the ARM peripherals. But guys like Siva, for example, Imagination, these are the people that are living on the Apple chip. Okay. Okay. In Again, the software. You know, I bought my iPhone 4S a couple weeks after it was available, and I bought a 4S because, you know, it's bigger is better, right? So I had no idea why I bought a 4S other than it wasn't a 4, it had an S on it, right? And so I'm this Thanksgiving, I'm down in Palm Springs with my family. We're vacationing down there. I got about 2 hours of battery life, right? So I go, shit, man, you know, what am I doing wrong? So anyway, you know, Apple doesn't let you talk to anybody, so you have to make an appointment with the Apple Genius and down at the store. So I make my appointment in Palm Springs with the Apple Genius, and I spend like an hour waiting there, and finally gets around, and he shows how to shut up all the processes, right? All the processors that are going, and I'm thinking, oh, I'm taking it all in. Yeah, okay. So I do it, and anyway, my battery life goes about 6 hours. Then, a month later, I get a you know, automatic update waiting for you. You guys seen that little message on your Apple? So I said, sure. You know, hey, my phone went from 6 hours of me shutting off every process to 12 hours without shutting off any process. What happened? Well, we know what happened. You know, it was all software. What they did is figured out some of those scenarios and just limited them and figured out a better way to shut stuff off with dark silicon. So, you know, these processors are like turn on, turn off because of the software. Good luck verifying that. So, man, I put my money in some verification companies. There's gonna be a lot more verification sold. NVIDIA's got one processor they sell to Samsung, right? I heard that NVIDIA's planning on doing 3 processors. They're doing a low power one, no surprise. They're doing a fast one, yep. And so the nominal cheap one, right? So they're gonna have 3 of them. Hey, their verification requirements just went up by 3, right? I mean, I don't have a PhD in math, but you know, I can figure that out, right? So verification is going to go through the roof, right? And it's just not the license we buy from EDA; it's all those verification engineers, right? So that's going to be the huge market here in the next couple of years. Cadence gets their results; they published them I don't know, a couple of weeks ago. Driven by emulation, they were supply limited on emulators. If they had more emulators, they could have sold more and shipped more, you know? And what's that tell you, right? That tells you that this isn't becoming something just a processor guy does. It says that every SoC's guy's got to do it. And the only reason you use emulation is because you got software to deal with, right? You got to resolve that software. So that verification, emulation, prototyping market, just as Joyce said, this SoC realization market's going to explode. Right? And I just got to make sure that I'm in the right place to apply the Hogan tax, which is always a challenge. Okay, so this is a quick picture. You know, by the way, slides are available. You know, we'll get them to you tomorrow. But if I turn this slide sideways, just sideways, it looks just like Intel. So what I mean by that